You called Discovery the return of Star Trek to television. How long had it been since Star Trek had been in current form? Well, Enterprise ended in 2005 and Discovery debuted in 2017, so that would be a 12-year absence. The only longer gap was the 18 years between TOS and TNG. Okay, so it was kind of a big deal. I'm assuming they went all out on getting exactly the right production crew, huh? Yes and no. They did go out of their way to get Nicholas Meyer as producer, who wrote and directed Star Trek films 2 and 6, as well as Brian Fuller for showrunner, who had written for DS9 and Voyager. Wow, really? That sounds fantastic for old school Trekkies. It was. Then in 2016, we got Whiplash. First, we heard Brian Fuller was out over creative differences with CBS. Damn, that was fast. Wait, CBS? I thought this was a Paramount IP. We'll get to that later. Focus. Okay, so Fuller was out. Meyer too. What? However, Meyer fulfilled his season 1 commitment before leaving, and even then it was only because CBS decided to move him to a different Star Trek project that still hasn't been released yet. Okay, well that's cool. Now, about the IP ownership, you said a while ago that Viacom owned both CBS and Paramount and didn't merge them until 1994. But even since then, I've only ever seen Paramount's name on Star Trek. And then CBS broke with Viacom in 2005, which is when the franchise went dormant. So when the hell did CBS stake their claim? The same time they decided to launch their wholly owned streaming platform, which at the time was called CBS All Access. They picked Discovery to be a launch title for it, just as Voyager had been for UPN. I mean, that's cool, but you said Star Trek was returning to television. If CBS wanted their name on it, why didn't they just air the show on the CBS network? They actually did. The pilot, that is. Or the first half of it anyway. Then only streaming after that. Oh, and then they later changed the name of the platform to Paramount Plus, but they were still legally required to use different design aesthetics for the sets and costumes on Discovery just because CBS's name was on the launch. That same issue actually applied to the reboot films too. I forgot to mention that. Oh, and they fired the showrunners that replaced Fuller after season 1. Holy crap! On top of all that, just burning through 3 or 4 different showrunners before the end of the first season? And then season 2 was Alex Kurtzman from the reboot films. No! Relax. No J.J. Abrams this time. Except I do think Bad Robot was credited for something I can't remember now. Bruh, this already sounds like a chaotic web of bureaucracy, and we haven't even gotten to the plot yet. We're just getting started. So the plot begins as a prequel, taking place roughly 10 years before the events of TOS, and depicts the start of the Federation's war with the Klingons. We are following Commander Michael Burnham, first officer of the USS Shenzhou, under Captain Philippa Georgiou. Shenzhou encounters some weird Klingons in deep space guarding an object of some apparent religious significance. Burnham contacts the Vulcan ambassador, Sarek, for more details. You mean the Sarek? Just hang on, trust me. Sarek indicates the group guarding this object may use it somehow to attempt uniting the fractured houses of the Klingon Empire, and tells her that Shenzhou needs to manage the stakes by earning their respect. He also tells her that when the Vulcans made first contact with the Klingons, they earned respect by being the first to open fire, starting a sort of tradition between them that sees the Vulcans always firing first when greeting Klingons in neutral territory. Burnham suggests this to Captain Georgiou, but Georgiou cites Starfleet regulations precluding them from being the aggressor. Meanwhile, more Klingon ships are inbound, and the question of whether this encounter will start a war hinges on this decision. So Burnham decides to commit mutiny. Whoa, that escalated quickly. By disabling Georgiou with a Vulcan nerve pinch. With a what? Is Burnham Vulcan? Negative. 100% human, but stay with me. Burnham attempts to assume command and orders Shenzhou to fire, believing this will avoid war. But Georgiou recovers and thwarts her before the order is carried out. The Klingon reinforcements arrive and interpret the situation the way Burnham and Sarek predicted they would, and the first skirmish of the war begins. By the end of the pilot, Georgiou is dead, Shenzhou is lost, and Burnham is imprisoned for mutiny. But her release is negotiated by Captain Gabriel Lorca, played by Jason Isaacs, who is running a top-secret 31 operation as commanding officer of USS Discovery. So that's how we get to Discovery. That's... I don't know where to start, man. Let's just start here. How can some random first officer get immediate access to the Vulcan ambassador? And how can she, a human, perform the Vulcan nerve pinch? Sarek's her adopted father. But that would make her the adopted sister of Spock. Yeah. Raised on Vulcan? And we never heard about any of this before? This, my friend, is the kind of canonical expansion that blurs the line between an augmentation and a retcon. And the first 2 seasons of Discovery are just chock full of them, let me tell you. Like what? Like how the ship has an experimental engine called the Spore Drive, which utilizes a subspace mycelial network permeating the entire multiverse to jump megaparsecs in seconds, and or cross into alternate universes. And this is tech available 10 years before Kirk commands Enterprise? Remember, it's top secret, because it's also kind of unethical. Why? The short version is the tech requires attachment to a living organism in order to work, and its operation is astoundingly painful to that organism, up to and including fatality. The very concept runs anathema to Starfleet's prime directive, so the tech strictly belongs to Section 31, which means Discovery reports to them almost more than to Starfleet. It sounds like the tone of Discovery is the darkest yet seen in Star Trek. Oh, dude, you do not even know. Season 1's tone is somewhere between Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. DS9 was uncomfortably dark for a 90s Star Trek show, but this? Watching season 1 of Discovery for the first time as a lifer Trekkie felt like being eviscerated. I felt genuinely nauseated at several points. Jesus. Okay. What other borderline retcons were there? Well, I guess this isn't technically a retcon, but the Klingons were redesigned. Wait, that's not a retcon? You mean there's an in-universe explanation for that? Tenuous one, but yeah. These Klingons separated from the Kronos Empire centuries ago for reasons of religious fundamentalism, and have thus begun an evolutionary divergence. That's not bad, actually. Except if war was instigated with a separate subfaction, why does Kronos involve itself in that war? That would be because the Separatists returned to Kronos, claiming their leader is the reincarnation of Kahless, their messianic icon. This initially starts a huge civil war among the houses that lasts for around 9 months, until Discovery finds a way around their cloaking technology, which forces the Klingons to unite in order to maintain defenses. The Separatists manage to install one of their people as the new High Chancellor. Thus, the Klingon Empire we all know is born. I mean, okay, like, that works, but it feels like a lot of changes that have to be justified. Almost like, why is this worth doing? Exactly. And why are the unique-looking Separatists never seen elsewhere, despite being the faction that resurrects the Klingon Empire? That's certainly never explained. You indicated several times that some of these things were unique to season 1. Why is that? Because the structure and format of this particular story is highly unusual. It's part serial, part episodic, and part anthological. all at the same time. What does anthological mean? That's a format where the premise and cast of the show change from season to season. Whoa, that's a different idea for Star Trek. Tell me about it. So, anyway, by the end of season 1, Lorca is dead, and the captain's chair goes to Science Officer Saru, but almost immediately after that, in season 2, they're sent on a tangential mission to assist a disabled USS Enterprise, and so are temporarily commanded by Enterprise's commanding officer, Captain Christopher Pike, played by Anson Mount. Wait. That's a character from Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds is a spin-off from Discovery. This season 2 plotline is a setup for that spin-off. Really? Huh. Well, there's a tonal shift for you. Yeah, Pike's arrival was a huge change of direction that brought a much-needed shot of hope and resolve to what was otherwise an extremely bleak story. And of course, since Pike's science officer is Spock, we get to see Burnham and Spock flesh out their quasi-sibling relationship. I cannot get over that, man. How is it that Spock has a human sister we've never heard about before? Well, most of season 2's plot pits Discovery against Section 31, and long story short, they opt to end that cat and mouse game by making Discovery jump over 900 years into the future. So, from season 3 onward, the show takes place in the 32nd century, wherein Michael Burnham is actually promoted to captain of Discovery. And back in the 23rd century, Pike and Spock report Discovery as destroyed, with all hands lost. Starfleet follows Spock's recommendation to render any and all information about Discovery, the crossfield design, the spore drive, and all related personnel classified under penalty of treason. Okay, so that's why we never heard. Holy... Wow, dude. This is one convoluted show. Is that why people fight about it so much? That is a big reason, yeah, but there's also something else about it that we haven't talked about yet, and is probably the biggest cause of conflict. What's that? Remember how I said the soul of Star Trek is about confronting aspects of present-day society? Yeah. Well, most of the fighting about Discovery now revolves around the subject of its confrontation, which is twofold. And that would be, first, the marginalization of the LGBTQIA+ community, and second, the mental health crisis, specifically the challenges of healing from trauma. Okay, now I know why the tea is so hot with this one. Hold on tight, lassie, it gets bumpy from here. All right, let's have it. How did Discovery confront LGBTQIA+ marginalization and psychological trauma? The former is confronted by just the sheer level of representation on display. The chief engineer and the chief medical officer are a married gay couple, which is already a significant first for Star Trek. Their marriage is portrayed with a sort of matter-of-fact, nonchalant candor, which is such a smart move in today's climate. But there's also a younger couple in the cast that's arguably even more significant. A non-binary human and a transgender Trill. Oh, hang on. The Trill are those symbiotic beings, yeah? The Trill themselves aren't inherently symbiotic, but they do serve as ideal hosts for a race of sentient symbiotes. And because the symbiotes are physiologically asexual, they're completely indifferent to things like gender identity or sexual orientation. This quality has made the Trill a frequent go-to for exploring issues like this ever since they were introduced in The Next Generation. So this scenario is classic Star Trek storytelling. Wow, so off the bat, 4 of Discovery's main characters exist outside cishet norms. Oh, those are just the couples, dude. Comedian Tig Notaro has a recurring role too, and both she and her character are lesbian women with a masculine expression. Oh, and on that note, It's also worth mentioning that these actors embody the same identities as their characters, which lends a certain credibility to the portrayal. And the characters are neither a gimmick nor cannon fodder? That's kind of extraordinary. Some call it extraordinary, some call it long overdue, and others call it incendiary. Here we go. Yeah. So the most controversial aspect of Star Trek is its firm dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. That stance has to be firm because it faces fierce opposition in the present day. And those opponents have recently appropriated their new favorite four-letter word to summarize DEI in a contemptuously sarcastic way. That word is... I know this one. Woke. Correct. Just as TOS openly defied segregationists back in the 60s, Discovery is openly defying homophobes and transphobes today. So of course those people are going to think that this is just an absolute bulldozer of wokeness here to ram itself down the throats of innocent cishet people. Come on, really? This is Star Trek we're talking about. What were they expecting? Focus on the family? Yeah, exactly. If anything has ever been true about Star Trek as a whole, it's that it tends to subject conservatives to relentless scrutiny, often with a harsh and heavy hand. That's part of the reason that Nicholas Meyer and Rick Berman wanted the franchise to take a more balanced approach, explaining the logical limits of that kind of progressive ideology. I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable pivot to make in the 90s, but that was then. This is now. Why do you think Discovery chose to be so much more bold today? Oh, that is 100% a response to the rise of the far right in Western powers such as the United States and the United Kingdom. Remember, Discovery premiered in 2017, just 1 year after one of the most polarizing presidential elections in U.S. history. Oh, I didn't put that together. So some of the reason Discovery goes so hard is because that's exactly how you'd expect a franchise like Star Trek to recoil to real-world developments like that. Striking while the iron is hot always runs these kinds of risks, and Star Trek never apologizes for being okay with that. I see. Okay. Now, what about the whole trauma thing? Bro, I almost wonder if conservatives are even more angry about that than the other stuff. For real? Why? Okay, zoom out for a second, all right? In the first 2 seasons of Discovery, the Federation is at war with a ruthless enemy. That means that Starfleet is going to function a lot more like a military than like a science team, right? Right. Okay, now think about the pervading social atmosphere of today's militaries. How much compassion, empathy, and emotional labor do you think combatants can expect to receive from their superior officers? Dude, is that question even coherent? Have you seen Full Metal Jacket? Well, Discovery thinks that question is worth answering sincerely, and the answer it provides is Michael Burnham. Go on. Burnham is unique in that she is the first full-blooded human to be raised from adolescence on Vulcan. As a human, she has no option but to embody the full spectrum of human emotion. But being raised on Vulcan, she also believes very strongly that emotions are liable to be volatile and destructive, especially in diplomatic situations. But at the same time, she also knows that emotions are the bedrock of instinct, which many of the most effective Starfleet officers, like Chris Pike, for example, are revered for using effectively. That's a lot of tension to exist in a single person. Yeah, but that's not the point. Burnham has made up her mind that The mental well-being of her crew is as strategically important as their survival is. So she goes out of her way to do emotional labor with her crewmates to an extent that someone like Picard might think is distracting or perhaps even ridiculous. And he even had a resident counselor on the flagship Enterprise. Discovery is a Black Ops ship on active duty during a war. You take all that and consider it through today's lenses, and the whole concept seems implausible. Okay, but it's supposed to be in the future, not today. Why get mad about a future captain that's just giving a damn? Oh, people didn't get good and mad until the ship developed feelings of its own. The what did what now? The ship's computer absorbs an alien program that evolves it into an artificial life form named Zora, who does also experience emotions and sometimes becomes dysfunctional because of it, even to the point of insubordination. The ship itself disobeys orders because feelings, yeah. Okay, between the chaotic production, the sorta kinda anthological story format, and the unflinching defiance of current cultural norms, I feel like the confused fighting about this show is making more sense to me now. Also, my head hurts. Mine too, man. Big mood. Just remember, Star Trek is supposed to be at least a little bit uncomfortable. Part of the reason Discovery is so particularly jostling is because it's confronting the right now and is being steered by a bunch of new blood searching for interesting ways to redress this legendary franchise. For sure. Can we talk about something fun now? Well, the next show by release order is Picard, and I'm definitely going to have fun with that one. Great. Let's have some fun. And some freaking Dayquil or something. Man. But I'm also going to cover the exposition for Picard in a standalone video because it's too brilliant to not cover. But there's also like hella spoilers in there. So that'll be a separate video.